Hey, what's up? This is Hans with Requests for Music, and today we'll be looking at building sequences in Synclavier. And of course, you'll say there is no sequencer in Synclavier, and you're absolutely right. But what there is in there, though, is a repeat function or other ways to make sequences. I'll split it up because they all have their own way of working, and today I'll be looking at the repeat kind of way. Okay, so I'll start off with my simple sine wave again, simple sine wave, and with some effects included as I do all the time. I've added a bit of reverb, a bit of chorus, and a bit of delay. And now what we only have this very simple sine wave to start off with. And you'll say, okay, that doesn't repeat. There's no sequence in there, and you're absolutely right again. But what we can do is when we first look at the envelopes. Wrong pronunciation. Thanks, Rob, for saying that. So if I look at my envelopes, there's a time in there. This is a time bar, so I can see that now it has 100% sustain, so it just goes on sounding forever. And that's not what I want in this case. I want to be able to hear what it repeats in my sequence. So I'll turn back my sustain and I'll turn up my decay. And if I set my value, you can see on the lower bar that I've got it set at 1 second now. Yeah, you saw that underneath here. So if I turn this up, and you can see if it's at 1, it's 1 second. So if I now press the key, you hear that it sounds for 1 second. Yeah. If I go back from my screen to my standard panel, and I've got both parts on, but for this first thing, for this repeat thing, I have to look at my lower part, at my lower panel, and I've got a repeat there. And if I switch it on, it's starting to repeat in the rate, yeah, in the times of the rate time. And if I glide over my rate dial, I'll see that it's at 5 hertz. So that means that it repeats for 5 times per second. If I'll dial this back and I'll dial this to 1 hertz, it will repeat once every second. So if I press the key like this, I've got one once every second. I can lower it even further, so if I set it at 0.25, for instance, I get 4 times a second. So this already would be a simple way to get, for instance, 4 notes of the same length in this time. So what I could do, if I copy this partial, so I select my first partial, I copy it, and I paste it to my next one, and I paste it to my next one, and I paste it to the fourth one even. I've got 4 notes, and obviously you won't hear any difference at the moment. It's only louder. What I can do with it is go into my envelopes again. My first partial needs to be at 0, the point 0, because we've got this delay part here. And my first one will be at delay 0. If I put the next one at, say, for instance, 0.25, a quarter of a second, like this, and I put the next one 0.25 further, so that will be at 0.5, and the next one at 0.75, and I just double click on the value and then type it in. Now I've got them 0.25 seconds apart, so they're all within that time. But the nice part now is that I've got all of those values to work with, and I've got all of those envelopes to work with. If I select my partial first, my first partial, and I shift select the last one, yeah, it selects all of them, and then I can select, then I can change all of those values at the same time. So if and it leaves the delay intact. So so if I raise my attacks, for instance, like that, and maybe it's even better to put them 0.5 of a second apart, since we had 4 in a second. So I put the second one at 0.5 and the third at 1. And the fourth at 1.5. So I'll fill the complete range. Something like this. And now what I could do, for instance, is include some modulation on all of them. So if I go back into my mixer and make sure that I select all of them again from the first one, and then obviously I need to change the first one. And actually you can do this in every part. So if I have my partial 5 as first one and I would want to change all of these, I could just select the first one, and if I then change this, then they'll go along. So I select my first and shift select my fourth, and then turn up my modulation. So like this. So now I could go back into my envelopes and change all of the modulation harmonics, the harmonic envelopes as well. So dial back my sustain and then dial in decay. And if I wanted to change the rate again for my sequence, I could go back into this, go back to my rate, go into half a second, for instance. Oops, half. It's a bit hard to control. It's too bad that you can't dial click this or double click this to set a value for it, because if you double click it goes back to the default setting, which is 5 seconds. So now I've got it set at 0.5 seconds, and I've got all of them 0.5 seconds apart, so I've got it filled up completely. So now I could work in my in this screen again to get the sound that I needed, and then because I shift selected all of them, I can still change the overall sound. So if I, for instance, layer my peak value and lower my peak value and do something with this, with the attack, and maybe even change the sustain up, because as long as the harmonic envelope is longer than the amplitude, it will cut off the rest. So I could do something like this. Okay, and now I've got 4 of those same notes, but obviously what I can do now is transpose different notes. So if I would do something like go by the 5th, so I just or the 7th or so, and turn next up an octave, and turn this back to the 7th again. I've got something like this. Maybe lower all of them an octave. Something like that, and obviously turn up some of the effects a bit more. And obviously this works for the complete thing, so if I use chords like that, So now what I would probably want is to use this as sort of a backing, and then I can make a single partial or two partials or whatever to use as a solo, as a lead sound. So for instance, what I could do is make sure that this goes no further than my C3, for instance. So I could go back into my key dynamics and look at all of those. I've got those four still selected. So if I press my limit, I could just drag. That's strange. I could drag my first part back, and then it seems a bit buggy. So now, if I press higher than my C3, this won't sound anymore. So I could make a fifth one and change that to that next tone. So I've got from my C or C sharp. For my C sharp 3, the next partial will sound. So now I'll go on with this next partial and make that sound a little nicer. So I could do, what shall we do? What shall we make? What kind of sound shall we make? First go into the mixer, give it some volumes, of course. And give it a bit of slide. Give it a bit of more of modulation. So go into my mod settings, and what else shall we do? The only thing, what you can hear now, because it's still repeating, I have to be aware that that if I keep my note pressed, this will also repeat after a while. So while soloing, I have to be sure that I release my note before it's repeating again. So. Something like that. And if I wanted this to be fuller, of course, I could double this again and detune them a bit. So I go back into my screen, select this first one, copy it, go to the next partial, paste it, go back into my screen and go to my mixer and select this next one, maybe put them apart a bit. Something like this, maybe even change the chorus a bit, and maybe also a very slight bit of partial frequency ratio difference. So. Okay, and if I needed to change the sound of the bass sequence sort of a bit more, I could obviously go into my partial again, select my first one, select the last one, go into my envelope and change this. So and if I needed more what shall we say, a bit more high or something in it, I could obviously go into my modulators and change a bit there. And this only does the one that is really selected. So still I could even change the sound of all of those separately. Because as you can tell, I've got all of those little sizzly kind of frequencies put into my modulator, which adds to that sound. So I've got all of those differences. And still I could then overall change the timing for, or the peak values and stuff for that in my envelopes. So if I go in here and change my height of my peak again, change the sustain height, change the decay value, and maybe even lower the and obviously you can do lots of stuff more, because if you wanted just some kind of effect in there, for instance, I could, well, I'll take my last partial and work with that, and I'll put it as solo. So I got this, and I'll put it off pitch. Yes, so I've got something like this. So now every key that I press, and you can't see that here, but every key that I press, they all sound the same. So I can use this as an effect. Say that I wanted a very low sort of modulated effect. I could go into my screen again. I could change the octave setting for this. I'll put it very, very low, and I'll start modulating it. And I've got something like this. For instance. And obviously I don't want it to stay on that long, so I need to lower my sustain and give it a bit of decay. And what I could do is maybe something like this. So I could lower the peak value and then have it up at 100 later, so it will do that. But I could also go into my time slices and modulate that part. So by selecting this first one, copy it, and take one at 1 second, for instance, paste it there. And if I transpose my last one, maybe then not that high, but maybe 12 up or something. So now I've got this repeating every couple of seconds, and I could still change this a bit by this. So now if I switch the solo off, oh, I forgot to set my key dynamics actually for this one, so I need to turn this back to the same note again, same setting. So now the only thing that I press is my C3. And obviously I could also do this on the upbeat, so to speak. So I could also go this, I'll copy it to the 11th partial then. Oops, my mistake. And no undo. No undo. So I'll do this same effect one more time. So I'll put it on my 11th then. So I'll have my 11th and my 12th set at the same point. So I'll change this. So I've got the same setting for all of these lower ones again. Go and I'll do it for 11 and 12. So in 11, what I was going to do was going to lower my mixer, my octave, and I'll put it off. So I'll solo this first. So obviously you won't hear anything because the frequency is far too low for us to hear at the moment. But if I put up my modulation, you'll hear that there's quite something to hear because it modulates. Oops. So what did I do then? I went into my envelopes. Sorry. I pushed up my decay, lowered my, and then went into my time slices. Copied this first one, pasted it over there. And went into my envelopes again and made sure that my decay and this last one was transposed up 12. So, and if I wanted something like this to be happening on the upbeat, I could copy this over. So I'd select this one, copy, select my next one, paste, and just delay that next one. So if I now select this one, go into my envelopes and delay this by a second. Oh, not my. I need to delay my amplitude envelope. And say that I wanted this to go down, so I started off at 12 and then go, or 24 even, and the second one to go down to 0. I could go into my mixer and pan them a bit, so I panned the first one left and switch the solo off, so I got something like this. And then still, of course, got my solo sound. Something like that. Anyway, I'll leave it at this for this time, and the next time I'll be looking at making sequences on only one partial, and that's a bit more difficult, and so we'll take a look at that next time. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll hope to see you back on the next one. Cheers, bye bye.